All right, let's dive right in. Today's deep dive is taking us to Panama. Well, not literally, but to the incredible Panama Canal, a story requested by one of you awesome listeners.
It really is an amazing feat of engineering.
It is. We're going to unpack the whole thing from its humble beginnings to the impact it has on the world today. But before we get to the nitty-gritty, did you know that somebody actually swam the entire Panama Canal?
I did hear something about that.
Yeah. Back in 1928, Richard Halliburton paid a grand total of, get this, 36 cents in tolls for his little aquatic adventure.
Wow.
36 cents. Can you imagine?
That's got to be the cheapest way to cross, for sure. But I think we should start with maybe the basics.
Okay, yeah.
Like, why build a canal through Panama in the first place? What was the big deal?
Yeah, why not just sail around South America? It's all water, right?
Well, before the Panama Canal, that's exactly what ships had to do. Imagine navigating all the way around the tip of South America.
Oh, man.
Braving those treacherous waters of Cape Horn. We're talking about an extra 8,000 nautical miles added to their journey.
8,000.
Which could take months.
Wow. So the Panama Canal was like finding a shortcut, saving a ton of time and money.
Precisely. And in the world of shipping, time is money. Faster routes meant lower shipping costs, and that opened up a whole new world of possibilities for global trade. Suddenly, goods could move between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans much faster and cheaper.
It makes sense from a business perspective, but wasn't there something about it being a big deal for the military, too?
You're right. The canal had huge implications for global power dynamics. For the United States, it meant the ability to move their navy quickly between the two oceans. Like their naval power doubled overnight.
I see. So it was a major strategic advantage.
Absolutely. But there's also a controversial side to the canal story.
Right. You mentioned that earlier. What was so controversial about it?
Well, for starters, Panama was originally part of Colombia. And the United States played a significant role in supporting Panama's independence back in 1903. Some people argue that this conveniently allowed them to gain control over the Panama Canal Zone.
Sounds a little calculated, maybe.
Yeah, the Habu-Novarilla Treaty, which gave the U.S. this control, sparked resentment in Panama and kind of created a strained relationship between the two countries. The canal became a focal point for discussions about colonialism and national sovereignty.
So it wasn't just an engineering project. It was a geopolitical chess game with lasting consequences.
Exactly.
But before the U.S. stepped in, didn't the French try to build the canal first?
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
Led by Ferdinand de Lesseps, the engineer who built the Suez Canal.
Oh, yeah.
They were very confident, given their success with the Suez, but they really underestimated the challenges that Panama presented.
What went wrong for them? Was it just bad luck?
Not entirely. It was kind of a lesson in adaptability, you could say.
Really?
They were so set on copying their sea-level canal design from Suez that they failed to adapt to Panama's unique terrain and climate.
So even brilliance needs to be paired with flexibility.
I think that's a great way to put it. The French experience shows us that sometimes even the brightest minds have to be willing to adjust their approach. Listen to different perspectives and understand the environment they're working in. Panama, with its terrain, the rainforest, the constant rain.
Yeah.
It was a whole different ball game compared to the dry desert landscape of the Suez Canal.
I bet. This is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more about these challenges. Mountains, a wild river, and I know disease was a huge factor.
Oh, it was. Imagine this. Dense rainforest, relentless rain, and landslides that could just wipe out weeks of progress in an instant. The conditions were brutal.
Sounds more like an adventure movie than a construction project.
You got that right.
Yeah.
And then there was the disease. Malaria and yellow fever were everywhere, spread by mosquitoes that just thrived in that environment. Over 22,000 workers died during the French effort.
Oh my gosh, that's a staggering number.
It was a tragic reminder of the human cost of such an ambitious project.
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine working under those conditions.
Yeah.
So when the United States took over, they knew they needed a completely different approach.
They definitely learned from the French mistakes. They came to the project with a more pragmatic mindset, I think, understanding that they couldn't just force their way through.
Yeah.
They had to find a way to work with the environment, not against it.
Okay, I am hooked. Let's break down those challenges. Where do we even begin?
Well, let's start with the mountains. The Cordillera Central stood right in the path of the canal. To carve through them, they had to excavate millions of cubic yards of earth and rock.
Millions.
All while battling constant landslides.
How did they even measure that much earth back then? Millions of cubic yards. It's hard to even picture.
It took a lot of manpower, ingenuity, and brute force, really.
Hmm.
Massive steam shovels, powerful drills, miles of railroad track to haul away all that material. It was an engineering feat on a scale the world had rarely seen.
It's mind-boggling. And what about that wild river you mentioned? I imagine it's just constantly flooding the construction site.
The Chagres River was a major headache for those engineers.
I bet.
It was notorious for its unpredictable floods, overflowing its banks, flooding the excavation sites, just washing away all their progress. They had to figure out how to control this force of nature.
So how did they tame this beast? Did they just keep building bigger and bigger dams?
It was a bit more innovative than that. They realized that instead of fighting the river, they could use it to their advantage. And this led to the idea of a lock and lake system.
Ah, the locks. Those
Yeah.
giant water elevators that lift ships up and over the land. I've always wondered how those work. But where does the Chagres River fit into all of this?
Well, that's where the Gatun Dam comes in. This massive dam built across the Chagres River created Gatun Lake, one of the largest man-made lakes in the world at that time.
Wait, they created an entire lake.
They did. Gatun Lake became a crucial part of the canal. It provides the water to raise and lower ships in the locks, and it acts as a huge reservoir to manage the flow of the Chagres, especially during the rainy season.
So instead of just digging a straight channel through Panama, they created this incredible system of locks and lakes. They worked with the environment, not against it.
Exactly. It showed their adaptability and willingness to come up with new solutions. But even with the mountains and the rivers somewhat under control, there was still the threat of disease.
Right. I can only imagine how challenging that must have been. Thousands of workers in a tropical environment.
And that's where Dr. William C. Gorgas comes in. He was a U.S. Army physician, and he is considered a hero of the Panama Canal project.
Oh, this sounds like a story for part 2. I can't wait to hear more about Dr. Gorgas and how they finally conquered this incredible feat of engineering. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
It's just amazing to think about all the people involved and everything it took to make this dream a reality. It really is. And we'll be right back with more of this story after a quick break. Okay, so this Dr. Gorgas, you called him a hero of the Panama Canal project.
He was. He really understood that disease was just as big a threat as any mountain or river.
That makes sense.
Dr. Gorgas, he'd already made a name for himself fighting yellow fever in Cuba, so he came to Panama with a very clear goal to make the canal zone a safe place for the workers.
So it wasn't just about building a canal, it was about keeping the people building it healthy.
Exactly. And Dr. Gorgas, he knew what needed to be done. He focused on eliminating those mosquito breeding grounds. That was the source of malaria and yellow fever, right?
Yeah, so how did he do that? I mean, was there some kind of magic mosquito repellent back then?
Well, not magic, but pretty ingenious for the time. He organized this massive effort to drain the swamps, fumigate the buildings, and even improve housing conditions for the workers.
So it was like a comprehensive approach, not just treating the diseases after the fact, but preventing them from happening in the first place.
Exactly. And you know what? His efforts were incredibly successful.
That's great.
The rates of those diseases, malaria and yellow fever, they plummeted. He saved countless lives.
Wow.
His work in Panama actually helped establish the foundation for modern mosquito control and how we deal with tropical diseases even today.
That's amazing. It sounds like Dr. Gorgas' impact went way beyond just the Panama Canal. But getting back to the canal itself, we've talked about the mountains, the river, the disease. How did they actually build those massive locks? I mean, they're basically giant water elevators, right?
They are. The locks, they're a testament to human ingenuity, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Each lock chamber is filled with water from Gatun Lake, raising or lowering ships to the next level.
Right.
It's all based on a system of valves and gates that regulate the flow of water, kind of like a giant bathtub.
It's unbelievable. It's mind-blowing to think they built these massive structures over 100 years ago, and they're still working today.
The quality of the engineering back then was amazing. But with the way shipping has changed, the canal needed an upgrade to keep up with the demands of modern trade.
Right. I've heard about the Panama Canal expansion. What was the reason for that?
Well, think about the ships that were sailing when the canal first opened. They were tiny compared to the massive cargo ships we have today. These modern vessels, they call them Neo-Panamax ships, they're way bigger than what the original canal was designed for.
So they had to make the canal bigger, supersize it for those supersized ships?
Yeah, pretty much. In 2016, the Panama Canal Authority finished this huge expansion project. They built a new set of locks, bigger ones, and they run parallel to the original ones just to accommodate these massive ships.
Wow. So are the new locks the same as the old ones, or are they different?
The new locks are even more high-tech. They have these water-saving basins that help reduce waste, and the control systems are more sophisticated to manage the flow of all those ships.
It's amazing how they're taking this over 100-year-old waterway and keeping it relevant for the 21st century.
It really is. And it shows how important the Panama Canal still is as this vital artery of global trade. It's hard to grasp just how big of an economic impact it has.
I believe it.
Today, the canal handles something like 6% of the entire world's maritime trade.
6%. That's a massive amount of the stuff we use every single day. What kind of goods are we talking about?
Everything you can imagine. Oil, grain, cars, electronics, clothing. You name it. It's all moving through the Panama Canal, connecting economies from all over the world.
So the Panama Canal is like the circulatory system of global trade.
That's a perfect way to describe it. It's a vital organ, pumping goods and resources all over the world. And it generates billions of dollars in revenue for Panama every year, making it a key part of their economy.
It sounds like a win-win for everybody. Faster shipping, lower costs, and it helps the Panamanian economy. But we have to talk about the environmental impact, right? Building and operating something this massive must have downsides.
You're absolutely right. It would be naive to think there were no environmental consequences. Building the canal, especially early on, led to deforestation, loss of habitat, and things like water management and potential pollution are still ongoing concerns.
Yeah. It seems like it's not just about the amazing engineering, but also about the responsibility that comes with it to manage that environmental impact.
You're spot on. The Panama Canal Authority has been working to try and mitigate those impacts through all kinds of efforts. Things like reforestation programs, water conservation. They even use electric locomotives to move ships through the locks so there are fewer emissions.
So it sounds like they're trying to be more sustainable.
They are. But the story of the Panama Canal makes us think about the bigger picture, too.
In what way?
Well, can massive projects like this ever be truly sustainable? That's a question we have to ask ourselves. But beyond the environmental impact, we also have to remember the human story of the Panama Canal.
Oh, right, the workers who built it. They face so many challenges, from disease to those difficult working conditions.
It's easy to get caught up in the marvel of the engineering and forget about the thousands who labored to make it happen. They came from all corners of the world, the Caribbean, Europe, Asia, each with their own stories of hardship and resilience. They all contributed to this amazing feat.
It's incredible to think about. Their stories are like woven into the very fabric of the canal.
Exactly. And for Panama, the canal is more than just a waterway. It's a source of national pride, especially after they got full control back from the U.S. in 1999.
Yeah.
It became a symbol of their independence, their place in the world. It's a really powerful story of national identity, ambition, and the complexities of history.
It is. It's amazing how the Panama Canal is so much more than just this shortcut between two oceans. It's a story about human ambition, perseverance, the relationship between technology, politics, the environment. It's incredible.
It is. And that story continues to evolve today. Remember that story we started with about the guy who swam the canal?
Yeah, Richard Halliburton and his 36-cent swim.
It just goes to show you the kind of hold this canal has on our imagination.
I wonder what Richard Halliburton would think about the Panama Canal today, if he could see it now.
I think he'd be amazed by the changes, by how much bigger it is, by the technology, but maybe he'd also be struck by how much effort goes into addressing those environmental and social challenges that come with something this big.
It is a reminder that progress and responsibility go hand in hand.
They do. Even as we celebrate these incredible feats of engineering like the Panama Canal, we can't forget about the long-term consequences of our actions. We need to strive for a future where progress benefits everyone and the planet, too.
That's a great point. This deep dive has given me a whole new perspective on the Panama Canal. It's not just a waterway. It's a symbol of human ambition, a testament to engineering, and a reminder that we have to be mindful of the impact of what we build.
It's a story that's still unfolding, and it'll be fascinating to see how it shapes the future of global trade and how we interact with the environment in the years to come.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny, we kind of take the Panama Canal for granted. It's just there connecting the world. But behind it is this amazing story of struggle, innovation, and, yeah, even a bit of controversy.
It really makes you appreciate how much ingenuity it took to even come up with this project, let alone make it a reality. Imagine the conversations. Let's cut a 50-mile path through a mountain range, tame a wild river. Oh, and by the way, figure out how to keep people from dying from tropical diseases.
No big deal, right. But seriously, it's inspiring to see how they overcame those obstacles, from those first ideas of Ferdinand de Lesseps to Dr. Gorgas's work with public health and the incredible engineering of those locks. It shows what humans can do when they put their minds to it.
And we can't forget the work being done today to expand the canal and make sure it doesn't harm the environment. They're constantly adapting to the changing world of global trade and trying to do it sustainably. It's a balancing act, for sure.
It makes you wonder what the future holds for the Panama Canal. Can it keep up with those giant ships? What about climate change? How will that affect things?
It's a fascinating thing to think about. The history of the canal is full of twists and turns. Who would have guessed that someone would swim the whole thing and pay less than $1 in tolls?
Richard Halliburton, the ultimate bargain hunter. This deep dive has really been eye-opening for me. I feel like I've learned so much about the Panama Canal, but I've also gained a new perspective on human achievement and the challenges we face in the world.
That's what these deep dives are all about. Uncovering those fascinating facts, exploring complex issues, and coming away with a sense of wonder, maybe even some new questions to think about.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked a curiosity to learn more about engineering marvels, or the history of global trade, or even just think about the balance between progress and keeping our planet healthy.
The Panama Canal shows us that human ingenuity can achieve incredible things, but it also makes us think about the consequences of our actions and how to create a future that's good for both people and the planet.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the Panama Canal. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's amazing, isn't it? When you think about it, the Panama Canal, it's this incredible feat of engineering. And we almost take it for granted. It's true. I mean, just think about what they had to do. Cut through a mountain range, 50 miles?
Yeah.
And then they had to tame this wild river, the Chagres.
Right, and all the while trying to prevent thousands of workers from dying from those horrible tropical diseases.
Exactly. And they did it.
It's really inspiring when you think about how they overcame those challenges. Ferdinand de Lesseps with his vision, Dr. Gorgas and his public health efforts, and the engineering, those locks. Unbelievable.
And don't forget, the work continues even today, making the canal bigger, protecting the environment. It's this constant process of adaptation, keeping up with the world.
It really makes you think about the future of the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
Can it handle those ever-growing ships? What about climate change? How will that impact everything?
It's fascinating to consider. Who knows what the future holds? I mean, look at the past. Did anyone expect someone to swim the whole thing?
And pay less than $1.
Richard Halliburton, what a character.
This whole deep dive has been such an eye-opener, seriously. I've learned a ton about the Panama Canal, but it's more than that. It's given me a new way of thinking about what humans can achieve and the challenges we all face.
I think that's the power of these deep dives. We uncover those fascinating stories, we wrestle with complex issues, and hopefully we walk away with a sense of wonder and a few new questions to ponder.
Absolutely. And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has ignited that spark of curiosity in you. Maybe you'll want to explore other engineering marvels or delve into the world of global trade. Or maybe you'll simply take a moment to appreciate the balance between progress and protecting our planet.
It's a delicate balance. The Panama Canal is a powerful symbol of human ingenuity. It reminds us what's possible, but it also pushes us to think about the long-term impacts of our actions, to strive for a future that benefits everyone and the environment, too.
That's a great message to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Panama Canal. We hope you enjoyed the journey. And remember, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.